That's right, Brian. Well, there's a lot of frustration here in the halls of Congress tonight, but there's also some guarded optimism that they might continue these talks late into the night tonight and then have something to vote on when they come back into session in the Senate side of the Capitol at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Let me give you a sense of the cautious optimism here. This from Senator Harry Reid, the Democratic leader in the Senate, earlier today. Take a listen.
I was really gratified to hear the Republicans have taken their demand for Social Security benefit cuts off the table. Truly should never been on the table to begin with. There's still significant distance between the two sides, but negotiations continue.
And the question is whether they get something on the Senate side that can pass in the Senate and then come over here to where I am now in the House of Representatives, and whether or not it can pass here. And to answer that question, I'm joined by Congressman Kevin Yoder. He's a Republican, and the Congressman just came out of the Republican conference meeting. And Congressman, can you give us a sense of exactly what happened in that meeting?
Well, we had an address by the Speaker, by the Majority Leader, had an opportunity to talk about kind of the status of the talks and where we are in the negotiations. I think there's a lot of optimism in the air that we may get some legislation tomorrow to consider. Folks are very interested in having a chance to debate and consider Senate legislation. So I think, tonight we're still in the Capitol, we're still working, and we're hopeful that there'll be some movement here in the final hours. So still some optimism in the Capitol.
What are the chances, though, that something that comes out of the Senate can actually pass here in the House? I mean, obviously Republicans don't want to see tax increases. It's likely that this bill that comes out of the Senate is going to have some tax increases in it. Where are you guys going to stand when it comes down to a vote?
Well, I think we're going to have to see what's in the legislation. I think that's one of the things that's hard to say right now, because we're going to want to see how the negotiations go between the Senate leaders and the President on these final hours. Nothing's for certain, but I do think many of us are eager to have a chance to debate the legislation that the Senate would bring over. The House passed legislation earlier in the year to extend the rates for everyone. Just a week or two ago, we passed legislation to end the spending cuts, part of the Fiscal Cliff, to try to wrap all that up. And so we've passed legislation on both parts of this Fiscal Cliff debate, and we're hopeful we'll get a bill back from the Senate. And it's hard to tell where it will go, but I'm still optimistic that we can move legislation, get this averted before the final hour here tomorrow.
Now, Asian markets are opening tonight, and also U.S. markets have been very fixated on this Fiscal Cliff debate. How much does that weigh on you guys as you make these decisions, as we come down to the 11th hour here? How much are you going to be thinking about what the market impact of what you do tomorrow is going to be?
Well, I think our top focus ought to be on the economy and job creation. That's the rising tide that lifts the Capitol and in this country, putting people back to work. And so a self-inflicted wound is not a good idea, sending us into a recession. Many economists have said if taxes go up for everyone, then it's going to hurt the economy and create higher unemployment. We don't want that. And so certainly I know the market's watching this very closely, and investors are deciding what they're going to do based upon our determinations here. And so I think we'll be watching how the world reacts, but ultimately we need to get a bill put together that works for the American people, that's a long-term bill that actually solves the problem. And frankly, that's the challenge we have here on the waning hours, is we don't want to do something that is such a poor legislation that almost doing nothing would have been better. And so we still need a work product. We still need legislation that we can be proud of, that puts us towards fixing the problem and resolving some of these issues. And that still remains to be seen whether we can get there.
And last question for you. As you're working late into the night tonight, Speaker of the House John Boehner, if he brings a bill to the floor and it passes with mostly Democratic votes, can John Boehner keep his job after doing something like that?
Well, I don't think legislation will pass the floor unless it has significant Republican support. I don't see a bill going forward that the overwhelming majority of the Republican caucus opposes. And so if there is legislation that comes from the Senate that doesn't have the necessary components, you might see an effort to amend that in the House. But I don't think you'll see legislation pass the House that doesn't have a majority support from the Republican caucus.
Great. Congressman Yoder, thanks so much for joining us. Brian, there you see it. The needle they've got to thread here is getting something through the Senate that can then come over here to the House side, and as the Congressman just said, pass with Republican votes, not with a majority of Democratic votes. And that's going to be very, very difficult to do tomorrow on such short notice, Brian.
Was that noise the Fiscal Cliff